Good evening. Welcome to Legacy Battle Podcast. I am Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. With me tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zones, Brian King. Also tonight we're joined by Kevin Adams and Brett Ebert. Tonight's debate is going to be different than all our prior shows. There's going to be no winner, and that's never happened before in the history of Legacy Battle. So we've each picked what we believe is the biggest what if in sports. And what if is a topic that has come up so many times on this show. So tonight we're finally going to talk it out, debate it out, and see what we can come up with here in these conversations. And we're also at the end, we're going to briefly each discuss another what if that we felt was a strong contender and an honorable mention. So the order tonight, we're going to be starting off with Kevin. Kevin, what is your what if?
So can I just go straight into my whole segment here?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm taking us back to 2003. Chicago Cubs entering their 132nd season for their franchise, 128th in the National League and 88th at the legendary Wrigley Field. That year they were off to a great start, finishing the Central Division for the National League. In first place with a record of 88 and 74. First round of the playoffs, they beat Atlanta, and then they went into the second round to go to the World Series. They faced off against the Florida Marlins. Marlins ended up winning the championship that year, but there was a what-if moment in one of the games that potentially could have. Well, it would have moved them to the finals, and I'm going to show you guys a little clip here of what the what if I'm going to be talking about is.
Reaching into the stands and could get it. He's riddled with a fan.
Just couldn't help himself.
All over it. Helping right down there. Mike Everett's on the play. If Alou has to reach into the stands, it's fair game for the fans to catch the ball. If the fan reaches out over the field, then it can be ruled fan interference. That is very, very close.
And Kevin, that video comes to us from
SI.com, and we do not own rights to that video, but that is from SI.com, and it's a video that was on YouTube as well. So the Stephen Bartman incident is my what if. What if Stephen Bartman didn't interfere with that play? Would Moises Alou have caught that ball? If you look at that video, it's clear as day. He definitely would have caught that ball. That ball was landing in his glove. And at that game, it was game 6, 8th inning. They had one out already in that game. They were leading 3-0 in that game. And they had a 3-2 lead in the series. And that catch would have given them out 2. Now, there's some people that argue that that wasn't the main issue of why they lost that game. Alex Gonzalez made a serious error later in that inning, which caused 5 unearned runs. But the Cubs were first in their division. They were ready to go to the finals, and this was the game that was going to put them there. And Bartman interfered with that play, and Moises Alou was definitely going to catch that ball.
Okay. Well, what do you, Brian, what do you think would have happened if that play didn't happen?
Well, I mean, I think there's a good chance, of course, like Kevin said, that the Cubs go on to win that game, and that would have eliminated the Marlins, obviously. Then you have to wonder, the Marlins won the World Series in 2003, and then another year passed, and then in 2005 they had a massive fire sale where, I mean, just any asset that the franchise owned, they just got rid of. And so Josh Beckett is one of them. Yeah. And so you have to wonder, does that fire sale happen if this play doesn't happen. It's hard to say because it seemed like the fire sale was kind of justified by the owner because they had won the World Series. But had they not won the World Series, or are they still hungry? It's hard to say. So it's a quality what if, not only because of what would have happened with the Cubs, a chance to break that what was 100-something odd year streak of not winning the World Series, but also what it did to the Marlins franchise as well.
That's true. I'm going to take a different route here. I'm going to say the Cubs, they just weren't that good. They only won 88 games that year. That usually doesn't even get you into the playoffs, 88 games. Usually it's 90 plus to get into the playoffs. The year before that, they only won 67 games. And the years following, they won 89 the next season, but then they only won 79 and 66. So it's not like this team was stacked. They had a nice run that year. They made some deadline acquisitions, bringing in Kenny Lofton, of course, and Aramis Ramirez, pretty much taking the last strain of life out of the Pittsburgh Pirates on that trade. But I just don't think they were that good, and I really think it was the curse of the Billy Goat. That's what I'm going with. What about you, Brett?
Hey, that's one of the most infamous scenes for one of the loneliest fans in the history of sports, to be sitting in that seat, everybody's eyes on you. I mean, just that picture speaks 1,000 words when he's sitting there by himself with his headphones on. And the poor guy had to disappear. But I think it's a little crazy to blame a game that this wasn't a third out of ninth inning. This wasn't like the end of the game. So I think it's kind of tough to blame it all on one guy. And as Kevin said, they had made Alex Gonzalez had made an error, a really big one that ended up scoring, I think, 3 runs in that inning. And then they had intentionally walked 2 players in that inning early on that eventually ended up scoring as well. So I think the Cubs just kind of imploded. Now, does that play a factor in their inning implosion? Possibly. I mean, it got emotions high and it maybe got them off their game. Maybe that's why Alex Gonzalez was, made that error. Who knows? You never really know. But I think it's kind of hard to blame it on just that one fan and that one play.
Kevin?
Well, we can argue, though, that, sports is a very highly mental game. And, we've had, in our hockey games, we've had calls not go our way, and then our team self-imploded. It's the mental part of the game, and I think this play completely got to the Cubs mentally, and they just couldn't recover. And then, as you see, the error there by Alex Gonzalez, and they just kind of fell off the wagon there. And then the next day, they lost Game 7.
So from the what-if aspect of it, Kevin, since it's your topic, had it not happened, do they win that series? And do they also go on and win the World Series, which would have been, I believe that was the Yankees that year that the Marlins team? Are they taking out Derek Jeter and company?
So that play, it definitely changed the dynamics of that inning. More people were on base. They needed to get 2 outs at that point. They were up 3-0, and that play led to the demise. It kept more base runners on. It advanced the base runners. And I think just mentally, I think it did affect them. I think they probably would have won that game because now you have the whole stadium up in an uproar as well. And I feel like that one play, I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I'm saying it definitely contributed to the other factors of why they ended up losing the lead and losing that game. And I think they would have won that game, which ultimately would have won the series for them. So, yes, I do think if he did not interfere with that, the whole dynamic of the game would have been different. And I guarantee you they probably would have won that game.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the question is do they go on and did they beat the Yankees the same way that the Marlins did? I mean, maybe the matchups is not quite as good. I really don't know. I mean, maybe they do go and they beat the Yankees. Maybe the Yankees just weren't quite, as strong as they were in years, after that. But it's tough to just point to this one play and say, well, that's it. They would have been champions if this didn't happen. They still.
I didn't necessarily say they're going to be champions. I think they would have won that game. which also would have sent them to the World Series and had a chance to beat the Yankees. I mean, look at the Marlins. I mean, they had 10 less wins, I think, than the Yankees did, and they ended up going in there and beating them. Yankees had home field advantage. The playoffs is a completely different atmosphere in every sport. Any team could rise above and beat any other team in the playoffs because it's like you start over, your adrenaline's pumping. It's a whole new atmosphere. People usually rise to their best playing ability in the playoffs. And I mean, the Marlins weren't any better than the Cubs, and the Marlins beat them. So, I mean, could they have beaten them? Yeah, they could have.
Well, I think we can all just agree that it was the Marlins' destiny that year. I think we can all agree to that, the way things fell upon down. So, Brett, let's move on to you. You're up next. What is your what if?
All right. So tonight I'm going to be talking about his airness, Michael Jordan. Before I get into it, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player to ever play the game. I know that's going to sting a little bit of LeBron fans that might watch this, but that's okay. You're allowed to have your opinion. But my what if is going to be, what if Michael Jordan did not retire in 1993? What could the Bulls have pulled off in the years to come? What could Michael Jordan have pulled off in the years to come? And we could go over Michael Jordan's stats and records and awards, but that could take a whole show if we really started to go over that. So we'll just kind of focus on some of the key points here. But he played 15 NBA seasons, obviously most with the Bulls, Chicago Bulls, a little bit with the Wizards. He had 6 NBA championships, all of them that were with the Bulls. But the key point here is obviously he won 3 in a row with the Bulls from 1991 to 1993. Obviously, we know the great players that he played with, Scottie Pippins, the Steve Kerr. We could even, if we really want to talk about it later on when he returned, Rodman and everything else. But what was it? Tony Kukoc, right? Another one of the players on there.
Kukoc was the later years. Horace Grant was on the early years.
Horace Grant, there we go. But he, wins 3 titles at the prime of his career, at the prime age of 30. And then after the 93 season, he abruptly retires for 2 years. Now, there's a lot of rumors that go around about why he retired. Some say it was because of his gambling problem. And the commissioner at the time, David Stern, I believe it was, was kind of suspending him without suspending him. But to touch on a funny point, I've actually seen him gamble here at the Seminole Hard Rock in Tampa, and I've seen him put like $10,000 per hand on blackjack, and it's just unreal. It was him and Warren Sapp were there together. That was side note.
That's $10 to him.
I know that's true. That's true. I think more so. I don't know if I believe the gambling. I think it was more of his mental state after his father was murdered that year. And just kind of took effect to him, and he just was tired from 3 NBA runs, NBA title runs. So he retired, went to baseball right there. You see it behind Mike there. He's played for the White Sox. Obviously, we know he was kind of subpar, didn't really do that well. Was not that double sport athlete like some of the others. But going back to my what if, and this is where we get into it. We talk about what if Michael Jordan played in those 2 seasons after his first retirement. What could the Bulls have done? Now, mind you, the Bulls won 3 in a row. In those 2 years he was retired, the Bulls made the playoffs. Scottie Pippen really flourished when Jordan wasn't there. They made the playoffs, but obviously they did not make the finals or win any championships. I believe if you put Jordan back on that team, they win the championship both years. That's my argument. And then you go into the fact that after he came back from his retirement, they won 3 more. So now you're talking about 8 championships in a row, which ties the Boston Celtics from, I think, the 60s for the most titles in a row, which obviously I don't think will ever be matched again in the history of the NBA. It's just a different league nowadays. But that not only, it gives them the 8 titles in a row, but it was also shown that if Jordan was to have played without retiring for those 2 years, and obviously his retirement in after the 98 season, he would have scored 41,000 points. That was what was projected, which would put him first overall in the history of the league. There's so many different things here that could play that would be in question. And then my point is even bigger. There's the debate, LeBron, some people throw Kobe out there. Obviously, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. There's many players that people could argue of the greatest of all time. But when you look at this, if he stays in, he doesn't retire, the Bulls win 8 championships in a row, odds are he's going to get another MVP or playoff MVP or something along those 2 years as well. Would there even really be an argument for the greatest player of all time? Would there even be a question as to who would be the greatest player on one of the greatest NBA dynasties of all time? And that's where my big what if is.
For me, I don't even think it's a question. I think he is the greatest of all time. Brian, I want to come to you first on this one because if I'm remembering correctly, you were a Hakeem Olajuwon fan?
Yes, I'm a big Hakeem fan. Yes.
Okay, so Jordan retires 93 after winning the 3 titles. 94, the Rockets win. 95, the Rockets win, led by Hakeem. Do you see MJ's Bulls taking them down?
I really do, and I'll tell you why. Especially 1994, because in 1994, Hakeem Olajuwon was the only All-Star on that Rockets team. And so they were the champions. They deserved it. But, man, if they would have had to deal with Jordan and Pippen, I don't know. And then the following season, 95, would have been a little bit closer because they added Clyde Drexler that year. And so with Clyde, they may have been able to match up, and maybe it's not as certain, but I think 1994 is just almost a foregone conclusion. I think that Jordan and Pippen would have taken the Rockets out that year.
So yeah, I agree as well. What I will say about the second year of his retirement, 95, he did come back at the end of that season. I don't remember how many games he played in the regular season, and then they went into the playoffs and they got swept by Brett's Orlando Magic, courtesy of Shaq and Penny Hardaway. But if anybody watched those games that he played towards the end of the year and in the playoffs, he was gassed at halftime. He, admits now that he was not in basketball shape. He was in baseball shape, and that's 2 different types of shape. That's not to say he wasn't in good shape, but we're talking completely different kind of
a lot of running
cardio for basketball. And then he used that summer in 95 to get back into basketball shape, and 96, 97, 98, boom, titles dominated. So Kevin, what do you think about what Brett was saying there with Jordan? If he stayed in all those years, is there even a discussion of LeBron or Kareem or Kobe, or is it just Jordan and that's it?
No, I mean, I agree with what Brett said. And, that season before 94, I mean, he played his fewest amount of games. If I'm not mistaken, he only played 78 games that season. And then in the 94 playoffs, there wasn't any really great teams in the playoffs. The best team got knocked out first round, and that was the Seattle Sonics. And the Knicks took them to Game 7, if I'm not mistaken. And that was without Jordan. You put Jordan in there, they beat the Knicks. They would destroy the Pacers, and then that would put the Bulls against Houston, and I think the Bulls would have taken Houston. Jordan is definitely a game changer, and you have to give him extra attention, which leaves other people open more. Yeah, I think they definitely would have won, definitely 94. He's a dominant player, and losing him was huge.
And just imagine if he hadn't used that summer to get in shape, he probably would have been on that Olympic team in 96, was it, I think?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something like that. Oh, man. Add him to that team. They might have been as good as the original Dream Team. But
yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next one. That's going to be me. Let me get my background up here. There we go. So in case anybody's wondering, let me move over a little bit so we can see his face there. My what if, the Babe. My what if is, what if Babe Ruth had never been traded? by the Boston Red Sox. What would have happened? So this is called the deal that changed the game. That's literally what they call it, the deal that changed the game. This is the Great Bambino, the Sultan of SWAT, the King of Crash, the Colossus of Clout, the Colossus of Clout. Yeah, Babe Ruth. So January 5th, 1920, we are going back 100 years. It's hard to believe that he is just still as well known today. You know, the name Babe Ruth is just hung around. But on that day in history, he was traded from the Boston Red Sox to the New York Yankees for the sum of $125,000, which doesn't sound like much now, but back then that was, you know, that was a good penny. Bleacher Report ranks this as the second worst trade of all time in sports. So that puts it up there. The only one that beat it, they had Gretzky from the Oilers to the Kings, but second all time for this. So Babe, I'll give you a little history here. Played 6 seasons in Boston, leading them to 3 World Series titles, setting a record of 29 2/3 scoreless innings pitched in the World Series. He hit .306 for his time in Boston with 49 homers, and this was as a pitcher. So he was a pitcher all but his last season there. He still pitched his last season, but he also played in the outfield there his last season a lot. So he wasn't playing every day till his final season there in Boston. But he did win 89 games for them as a pitcher and a 2.19 ERA over his career there, which that's good enough for 17th all time. Think of how many pitchers have pitched in baseball. So he gets traded, or he was in Boston. They had the 3 World Series titles. He gets traded to New York, stops pitching, becomes a full-time outfielder, and then he becomes, as we all know, the greatest home run hitter of all time. He leads New York to 7 pennants and 4 World Series championships, sets the all-time single-season home run record several times. He beats his own record. And he went on to become a .342 hitter. I don't think people realize that this guy's batting average on for his career was .342. That's outstanding. That's good for 10th all time. Everybody, you think Babe, you think home runs, but quite a hitter. He ranks 2nd all time in OBP, 1st in slugging, 4th in runs, 3rd in homers, 2nd in RBIs, and 3rd in walks. So 100 years, and he's still dominating in all the stats. But the what if comes in at this part. From 1920 to 2003, the Boston Red Sox never won a World Series, and it's called the Curse of the Bambino. The Curse of the Bambino took effect, and prior to the trade, Boston had won 5 of the first 15 World Series. So that's pretty incredible. And they won 0 after the trade till all the way till 2004. When the curse was broken. The Yankees were a joke before this trade. Hard to believe that now. They get them, they become a powerhouse after. They had never made a World Series until they got Babe Ruth. So, and they won 26 World Series from that trade all the way till 2003. They played in 39 of them during that span, and that's the most titles of any North American sports team. So, obviously it was big, but a lot of people, say, oh, the curse, it's not real, it's just bad luck or whatever. But let me just give you a couple side notes here. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little long on this one, but just to show you why I feel the curse is real. 1946, the Red Sox appeared in their first World Series since the sell of Babe Ruth, and they were favored to beat the Cardinals that year. Went to Game 7, tied 3-3. Cardinals playing the Cardinals. The Cardinals had a runner on first base. Guy comes out the bat, gets double. Johnny Pesky, the shortstop for Boston, his relay throw to home is late, and he hesitated on the throw. And people believe it was because the curse held his arm up, and that allowed the Cardinals to score. And there is film footage of this occurring, but people say it's inconclusive. Then we move to 1948. Red Sox finished their regular season tied for first place, and they lose the pennant to the Cleveland Indians in the Major League's first ever one-game playoff. So they hold that prestige of losing the first ever one-game playoff. In 1949, they needed to win just one of the last 2 games of the season to win the pennant, but they lost both games to the Yankees, who would go on to record 5 consecutive World Series from there. Then we're going to jump to 1978. They had a 14-game lead in the American League East over the Yankees on July 18th. They somehow still don't make it to the playoffs that year. So that's pretty incredible. And then, of course, the one everybody knows, Game 6, 1986 World Series. A little dinky hit down the first base line, and it goes between Bill Buckner's leg playing first base. Mookie Wilson scores. Mets win, force Game 7, win the World Series. You think it would end there, but it didn't. 1988, 1990, 1995, Red Sox are swept out of the playoffs. They set the postseason losing streak to a major league record of 13 straight games. Then in 98, they're defeated by the Yankees 4-1. Or they lost to the Indians in 98, 99. The Yankees beat them 4-1. Then we go to 2003. They're playing the Yankees in Game 7. Boston has a 5-2 lead in the 8th inning. They blow it. They lose in extra innings. So I believe had this trade of Babe Ruth not happened, nothing would have been said about the Red Sox losing. If they tried to keep him, they couldn't afford him. First off, that was part of the reason why they moved him. If they had tried to keep him, they wouldn't have been able to keep anyone else. But so there would have been other reasons why they had lost, and I don't think it would have changed history so much more. But the what if for me is, would they have lost for 100 years almost? I'll never be able to make that determination. It's too hard for me to say, but I do believe it altered the course of the Yankees. And once they got a player like Babe Ruth, it gave them high profile, and everybody wanted to be a Yankee. So I'll let one of you guys jump in on your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, you touched on a lot of what I was going to say as I was listening to you, but I mean, what it did for how it changed the Boston franchise. You're spot on, but I look at what it did and how it changed the Yankees franchise. I mean, we call Yankee Stadium the house that Babe Ruth built. That doesn't happen. And then you look at what happened there in, I believe it was in the 50s. I forget the exact year. Whenever there's 3 teams in New York, there's the Giants, there's the Yankees, and there's the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the Giants and the Dodgers are seen as like the stepchildren or whatever, and they're the ones that go out to California to try and seek their fortunes out there as franchises. Perhaps if things are different, maybe it's the Giants that stay in New York, or maybe it's the Dodgers that stay in New York, and it's the Yankees that end up. We could be talking about the Los Angeles Yankees right now. Who knows? And so, not only did it change the fortunes of the Red Sox, it definitely changed the fortunes of the Yankees as well.
Brett, I'm going to ask you a question on this one. A lot of people forget that Babe Ruth's final season actually was with Boston, just not the Red Sox. It was the Boston Braves. A lot of people think that was only done to try and reverse the curse. What do you think?
I'm going to have to agree completely that was done to try, because, I mean, tradition was everything. I mean, tradition is everything in most sports. And when you come down to it, everybody believed it was a curse. I mean, there was no doubt about it. And especially when you talk to Boston fans, they would tell you until they started their winning ways again, they were certain that is where it started. Everything was done back when this Babe Ruth trade was made. And, if I can touch on a point too, because Brian made some great points, I think this trade, not only what if for Boston, but it changed the landscape of baseball, because, I mean, Babe Ruth was one of those players that everybody wanted to come and see. Everybody would pay the money to come and see him. They'd fill up stadiums, as we're talking about, the home that Babe Ruth built. I mean, this is the point. And that revenue that the Yankees were able to start bringing in when they got him over there is what helped them sign some of those other players like Lou Gehrig and things like that. I mean, it's amazing how this one trade changed the landscape of baseball forever.
Kevin, a lot of people say that the curse was reversed in 2004 with the Boston Red Sox doing for the first time ever in baseball, coming back 3-0 to the Yankees and winning that series. What do you think?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that reverse the curse, because I mean, or what did they do really to reverse? I mean, yeah, they won the series, but I mean, if you look at it, Babe Ruth was the greatest hitter of all time, and the Red Sox traded him away, and he was the home run leader for the longest time until Hank Aaron hit his 715th to pass him up. But I mean, we're talking greatest hitter in baseball. They got rid of him. I mean, it definitely changed the landscape, like everyone said. And Brett actually brought up the point that I was going to bring up. If the Yankees don't get Ruth from Boston, do they bring in those players that they surrounded him with, like the Lou Gehrig and Tony Lazzara? I don't think that they would have brought in some of those players that they signed. But I mean, kudos to the 2014. I mean, I remember watching that series. They had a great team.
Bloody sock.
Yeah, Kurt Schilling with the bloody sock. They had a great team. They had all the pieces that they needed. But to come back down 3-0 and then beat them in Game 7 in New York, I mean, it definitely helped get rid of those suspicions that the curse was still around. But they had a great team that year.
All right. Well, let's move on to Brian. Brian, what is your what if?
My what if is, what if the Browns had never left Cleveland? First off, you start off, why did they leave Cleveland? They left Cleveland because there was a number of reasons, but the main reason was the owner of the Browns, Art Modell. He wanted Cleveland the city of Cleveland to build him a new stadium. And so when they refused to do so, that's whenever he searched for an alternate route, and ultimately he moves the team to Baltimore. So I have a number of sort of like little trails that move impacted. So first off, look at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens, they retain Ozzie Newsome as their general manager, and he turns out to be one of the better general managers of the last 25 years. He puts together a team where he drafts Ray Lewis, Peter Boulware, Jamal Lewis. He signs Shannon Sharp. He signs Rod Woodson. And in 2000, they're able to put together arguably one of the greatest single season defenses ever, and they win the Super Bowl. And this is only 5 years after the move. Then he goes on and he drafts Ed Reed, Joe Flacco, Terrell Suggs, and they do it again. And in 2012, they're the Super Bowl champions again. So in the 25 years of the Baltimore Ravens, they're able to win 2 Super Bowls. They're one of the model franchises in the NFL. They've had plenty of success, plenty of playoff success, great rivalry with the Steelers. And so, so first off, that part of it doesn't happen if they don't leave Cleveland. Then you look at who was the Cleveland Browns coach at that time. The Cleveland Browns coach was a guy named Belichick. And Belichick, he had that team going pretty good. In 1994, they had a #1 defense. They went 11-5, and they won a playoff game. So they were going pretty good. And even in 1995, before the news broke about the move, they were 4-4. They were hanging in there. They were doing pretty well. And then the news breaks in early November that the team's going to move, and they just fell apart. They end up 5-11. So Belichick, because of the move, he ends up leaving. Some say he got fired, some say he just didn't want to coach there, whatever. We're not sure, but he goes on to the Jets. He spends a little bit of time under his mentor, Bill Parcells, with the Jets, and then he goes on in 2000 and he goes to New England. So now that's the second part of what doesn't happen if the Browns don't leave Cleveland. The Patriots, they become probably the greatest dynasty in NFL history. I mean, they're still going on. They're just finally starting to taper off now, and we're talking, here in the last 20, 25 years. They go 6-3 in the Super Bowl. They win 31 playoff games. Belichick has a 676 winning percentage. just dominant, just a dominant dynasty. You know, right from the get-go, he takes over the team in 2000, 2001. Boom, they win the Super Bowl. Not only that, you have arguably the greatest NFL player of all time, or at least the greatest NFL quarterback, gets drafted by Bill Belichick in New England, and that's a guy by the name of Tom Brady. So all those things probably don't happen. Now, if you look at the actual state of the NFL and like the divisions and where the franchises lie, if the Browns do not leave to go to Baltimore, now there's no need for a new Browns franchise team. And in 2002, when they had 32 teams and they realigned all the divisions, they would have only had 31 teams. So where does that other team come from? You know, do we get a team in LA, because at the time LA did not have a team, or do we get a brand new team in Baltimore, or do we get a team in Toronto or OKC, or there's a number of places where a team could have came about. So you have all those things that would not have happened had Cleveland not left or had the Browns not left Cleveland. And so, and what would getting back to Tom Brady, what would have Tom Brady been? Would Belichick have still drafted him? Maybe he would have been a Brown and part of the Browns potential dynasty, or maybe he's just some guy that spent a couple years on somebody's practice squad and that's it. You know, you never know what could have happened. But the way I look at it is, if this does not occur, Cleveland had let's say they had some of the ingredients for a potential dynasty that would have maybe rivaled what we actually did see in New England, because they had the GM, Ozzie Newsome. They had the arguably the greatest head coach of all time in Bill Belichick. So it's tough to say. And then, you know, of course, they might have gotten the GOAT Tom Brady. So, you know, looking at things, the way things unfolded, the last 25 years of the NFL would have been just vastly different if this did not occur.
That is quite a trickle-down effect had that not occurred. Wow. That's some good information there. You don't even think about how far that goes out, you know, with Brady and Belichick. Brett, let me ask you this first. If there's any city that should know what it's like to lose a football team, it would be Baltimore. They lost the Colts. So do you think they should have said no to the Cleveland Browns coming there?
I mean, that's tough to decide, because you got to look at all the different factors that play into a team moving. And I mean, I think the city was just wanting another team back. I could tell you, as a fan standpoint, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were ever to be taken, I'd be rooting for the first team that wanted to come back here and restart. Now, given we all know what comes with restarting a complete franchise over, which is, like Brian touched on, great points with it. And I just think that's where it's difficult, because I mean, Baltimore, or the Browns, shifted to Baltimore, had that immediate success. Again, we're talking one of the greatest NFL defensive players to ever play the game, Ray Lewis, could have been on Cleveland, on the Browns. And it's something that, again, a great what if.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you think? Does Cleveland, do they become, I'm not going to say a dynasty, but at least a more competitive team than what they have been?
I mean, it's interesting that you know, they leave Cleveland, and I mean, they had some successful years there. And I remember, you know, the rivalry with Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, there were some good games. You know, the team moving and then actually getting a team back, I think actually hurt the city more, financially, mentally. I mean, in January of 2018, like going into that month, they had lost 34 of the last 35 games. And then they got a tax extension on the city to make the taxpayers pay for a new stadium. And then they put like the worst team in the NFL onto the field. People were actually seen wearing paper bags over their heads. So, I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, I think they definitely got the short end of the stick by losing the team that they had. But bringing that team back, like, I mean, even now, I mean, they're they're better, but they're still not performing to what they should be performing based on what they have on paper. And I think it was unfair and kind of crappy for Cleveland to get their team swept out from underneath them. And it definitely changed the dynamics of football in Cleveland. But Baltimore should be happy.
Well, I mean, I
Brian,
think another point I was going to say was, you just think about the longevity that those important pieces, you want your general manager to be able to spend a long time and be able to go through his entire winning formula. The same with the head coach. And Ozzie Newsome just retired a couple years ago, so he lasted all that time. And then Bill Belichick is still going now. So but then you look at what actually happened whenever Cleveland, whenever they got their new franchise. I mean, they've gone through, I don't even know how many general managers and head coaches since then, and quarterbacks. I mean, it's just been, you could fill a big room with all the different personnel that they've had. And that's really a big part of why they've struggled so much, is because there's just not that continuity of the same guys and the same, that are running things year after year. It's new guys every year. It's learn a new system, everybody's new all the time. And so it's so difficult to get things going.
Brian, I was going to kind of touch on that with you. I wanted to hear what you had to say, because you had mentioned, if Belichick had stayed, maybe they draft Tom Brady. How many quarterbacks have the Browns gone through? I mean, I'm sure you could name probably 10 off your head, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen that famous jersey where the guy has the Tim Couch jersey, and then there's like all the nameplates, like 30 something odd nameplates, all the way down to Baker Mayfield, of all the different Browns starting quarterbacks that they've had since they came back. And so,
I got those numbers if you want to hear them.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Let's hear that. Yeah.
Because that was something that interested me when you were talking about the quarterback and Tom Brady, that there, from 1999 to 2016, there had been 27 different starting quarterbacks for the Cleveland Browns.
Right. It's probably well over 30 now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it definitely is. And then you look at Baltimore in that same time span, and Baltimore only had 12. They were a little flexible throughout the 2000s, but obviously we know Flacco came in and he was the guy. But, I mean, the Browns, I think when I was even looking at the list, there was only one starter in a season that had played 14 or more games. They never had somebody complete a whole entire season. It was unreal.
Yeah,
that's
just
incredible.
Yeah, there's so much struggle, and I mean it's hard to get anywhere. And so then does the 0-16 season happen? Probably not. A lot of the blunders and the follies that we've seen from that franchise probably never happened.
27 different quarterbacks. That's why they call it the mistake by the lake. I mean, that's incredible. So, all right, let's move on to our honorable mention section. We'll go in the same order. So, Kevin, we're going to start with you. And for your honorable section, it is, what if Mario Lemieux hadn't got cancer? And we're all just going to take like a minute and a half, and just talk about our honorable mention. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so I mean, we had the Gretzky versus Lemieux podcast earlier. He had all those back issues, and then '93 he gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Had to go into chemotherapy treatments in 1993, and during that season he was chasing Gretzky's record for goals in a season and points, 92 goals and 215 points in a season. But he had to miss 2 months of that season. Even though he missed those 2 months in that season, he still won the NHL scoring title, only playing 60 games, and he scored 160 points in 60 games. That's almost 3 points a game. That is amazing. And then, unfortunately, the following year he took off. He had to take medical leave of absence because of he was just getting tired, fatigued, because of the radiation treatment from the cancer. But then he did end up, returning the season after that to win the Art Ross Trophy before he ultimately announced his retirement in '97. But I mean, he was one of the best players to ever play the game, and what if he didn't get that cancer and miss a whole season and whatnot? Would he have broken more of Gretzky's records? I think so.
Have to agree. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think he probably breaks 200 points at least. I mean that's never been broken by anyone else. If I'm not mistaken. No one else but Gretzky's ever gotten 200 in a season. So I think maybe Mario's got a good shot at doing that.
Yeah.
All right, Brett, your honorable mention. What if Michael Jordan, who you had earlier, doesn't retire the second time?
All right. So you look at the Bulls' 1998 season; they were 62-20. The team actually set the NBA record for most wins over a 3-year span, 203 wins and 43 losses. Jordan was averaging 28.7 points a game in that 1998 season, which by today's standards would be phenomenal. Obviously, they won the championship that year. And then again, he retired. Was it the physicality on his body of 3 more championship runs? I mean, I know that championship runs can beat people up. Was it that? Was it a just I want to be home with family? Nobody truly knows. You can all speculate. But with those numbers, I just feel like he comes back in the following season or beyond, instead of just jumping to the Wizards a few years later. I honestly don't see a team. I know that there were some up-and-coming teams again, but I don't know if I see a team that could challenge them. And Jordan, again, we're talking about my personal opinion, the greatest ever, that could challenge them in a 7-game series. So I actually do think they get another championship and at least one in the next 2 to 3 years if he plays.
I agree. At least one, maybe two, and changes history. He only left because Phil Jackson was leaving. If they kept that band together, Phil Jackson doesn't go to the Lakers, and we don't get Shaq and Kobe, winning their titles. So one little move changes history. So, Brian, let's move on to you next. It looks like I cut off half of Elway's head here, but you've got what if John Elway had stayed with the team that drafted him, the Colts?
Right. So, I mean, the reason why Elway did not want to play for the Baltimore Colts was because he sort of saw the writing on the wall. And it wasn't even so much him, it was more his dad, giving him advice. And he said, look, this franchise is not healthy right now. It's not looking good. And ultimately he was right. The Baltimore Colts end up leaving in the in the still of the night, and then they go out to Indianapolis. So if Elway stays with the Colts, there's one of two things could happen. Either he stays with them and he does so well that the Colts end up not moving. Now that one's kind of a little bit far-fetched. I don't think that happens because I think the writing was already on the wall. The other thing that happens is John Elway was one heck of a baseball player, and he was drafted to Major League. So I think that the latter is probably more accurate. It's that he goes to baseball and maybe he ends up being a star, an all-star, maybe even a World Series, who knows? But he had a lot of potential on the baseball side of things.
I'm pretty sure it was the Yankees that drafted him, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So he would have been there with Lee Mattingly and
Winfield,
tail end of Reg Jackson. Yeah. So he would
Ricky Henderson.
Ricky Henderson.
That's another big what if. Look what it did for Denver, him going to Denver. So.
Right. I mean, the Denver franchise, you think, yeah, exactly. You think about what he did for them. I mean, they've gone to 5 Super Bowls. Well, it's 5 Super Bowls with Elway. And so do they even have a ring right now? Does that even happen? I mean, he was even the owner whenever they won the Super Bowl here most recently. Yes. So is who even, or not the owner, but the GM? Yeah. Who even is the GM in Denver right now? If that doesn't occur, it's tough to say.
Yeah. See, there's one thing I don't like about that whole situation though. Is you got drafted by that team, and then you kind of slap them in the face because you don't want to play for them, kind of like Eli Manning did to the Chargers. And you could say what if that didn't happen? Would the Giants have won a Super Bowl too? But I think it's a disservice to the draft when you refuse to go to the team that drafted you.
I get that, but I think Elway's is a little bit different because the Chargers weren't in the same kind of state as the Baltimore Colts were. The Baltimore Colts were like, you could definitely see the writing on the wall. That franchise was not in good shape at all. And so it was just a business move. I don't think it was anything personal from the Elways. It was just a business move. Like, look, I don't want to get on a sinking ship.
Right.
Right. Okay, let's move on to our last honorable mention. That's going to be mine. And it's, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? What if The Rock had never gone to Hollywood? This is one of the biggest what ifs in wrestling. The Rock was several-time world champion. He had all those great matches with Stone Cold Steve Austin and, of course, Triple H. And, he was still on top when he decided to take the pin for Brock Lesnar, kind of passing the torch on to Brock Lesnar. And he, left, went pretty much full-time Hollywood. He'd come back every few years and just do one match, like at WrestleMania or something, just for the fans and because for the love of the sport. He really, truly does love wrestling. But so he passed the torch to Brock Lesnar, who then, out of nowhere, he just up and retires from wrestling at I want to say he was maybe 23, 24 years old. Very young, Brock Lesnar retires. And kind of left WWE with no top star, which forced them to create new stars, obviously. So, it was Edge showed up, became a big star. John Cena really took hold. Dave Batista, big actor now, of course. But, they took over kind of the reins of the WWE. Randy Orton got real big too. So the what if comes, though. If The Rock had stayed, how many classic matches could he have had with these guys, and how many more titles could he have had? Now, right now, it's always debated. When we had our wrestling show, we said that the top four was Hogan, Flair, Rock, and Austin. So they're all definitely up there. If The Rock had stayed and not gone to Hollywood, he's going to beat them all in title wins, and he's going to get even bigger than he already was. You figure you put another 10 years on him, he's probably more known than Hogan at that point, and probably making more money than Austin made during Austin's big run. So it's a pretty big what if from WWE. Obviously, The Rock I'm going to say he made the right decision. He's probably the biggest actor in Hollywood, at least as far as action films go. But that's my honorable mention. So, Kevin, I know you were a big fan of The Rock. You had his poster up in your room of him. Do you think that maybe that dream match would have happened with Shawn Michaels had he hung around, even though you didn't like him?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. Well, I mean, back then it would have been the first time probably that he worked with somebody he didn't like. But he's had, feuds with people in Hollywood too. But yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you have two of your biggest wrestlers go up against each other? I mean, that's the marquee matchups. I mean, there's been other wrestlers that couldn't stand each other and they faced off against each other. I mean, your two biggest wrestlers, it's going to bring in probably one of the biggest crowds that you could get. Yeah, so I would say if he would have stuck around, it probably would have happened.
I see Vince getting that done. I do.
Yeah.
The ultimate talker, Vince McMahon. So, all right. Well,
I'm wondering if maybe I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of looking on the other side of this. Maybe The Rock's kind of his act kind of gets a little bit played out if he's in wrestling for another 10 years, and maybe he's not quite as big of a star as what we kind of think that he would be, because you know that there's a certain shelf life for a certain act. And maybe, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine, but it's like it seems like he left at the height of his popularity. So we'll never really know if he would have sort of faded.
Well, him leaving the height of his popularity could have helped his Hollywood career.
True. I mean, he really only went from about 97 to 04. Even probably before 04, he was almost all the way out. So it wasn't the longest run. I mean, you look at somebody like Cena, he was on top from pretty much 2004 to 2018, really. So, it was a good 15-year run. I think they could have got another 10 years out of The Rock being on top. Then yeah, I definitely think. But he's also one of those guys who probably could have modified his character to continue to make it relevant. He has so much talent.
What if they kept him as a bad guy?
When he left, then he was a bad guy. When he lost to Brock, he was a bad guy. So, but.
Yeah.
Anyways, we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. This was a special show where there was no winner picked. So we hope you enjoyed us just having a conversation about it. And we hope that you'll continue to watch our show. And we thank you to everyone who has done it, who has been watching. And I'm going to throw out this trivia question as our final thing for tonight. Got to answer all parts of the question as usual. Throw your comments in on the Facebook page. You got to be a member of the Facebook group to win. So here is the trivia question for tonight. Name the 3 actors who the producers wanted to cast as Rocky in the 1976 film instead of Sylvester Stallone. And what was the name of the real-life boxer the character was based on? So you get those right, throw them in the comments section. We'll get a prize mailed out to you. So thank you for watching. Everyone have a great night. Good night. God bless.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right.